week 9 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few defenses, DSTs I would add this week. The first one, the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams were on bye out there in tons of fantasy leagues right now in 64%. And the last few weeks before they went on bye, they played well. Besides in week 5 versus the Niners, 26 points allowed, a sack. Week 6 of Baltimore, 3 points allowed, 4 sacks, and interception, 2 fumble recoveries. In week 7 in London versus Jacksonville, 7 points allowed, 7 sacks. So the Rams are playing good defense right now, obviously. They're going out there making plays, and they got a great matchup coming up here in week 9 versus Saints, where they got shut down by Tampa Bay, losing 23-3 in that ball game. So with all those factors and the Rams playing good football and they're putting up points and making it easier for their defense to go out there and make plays, they're definitely an ad this week. Like I said, out there in 64% of fantasy leagues, and a great matchup versus one of the worst teams in the league in the New Orleans Saints. The next DST is the Chicago Bears. So the Chicago Bears, they're out there in 73% of fantasy league. I know they're coming off a loss in that one at the Baltimore Ravens, giving up 30 points in that game. But before that, they were going out there making plays. Was this Chicago Bear team. Week 6 at the Commanders, 24 points allowed, 3 sacks, and interception, 2 fumble recoveries. Week 7 versus Saints, 14 points allowed, 4 sacks, 3 INTs, a fumble recovery. And then week 8 at Baltimore, they put in a stinker, 30 points allowed, 2 sacks. So week 9, on paper, a good matchup at Cincinnati, but obviously ever since Joe Flacco's been in their quarterback, they've been going out there and making plays. But I still think Flacco could turn the football over. If you get a hand on him as well, he's going to go down and take the sack. So I know it's not a great matchup, but this week a little thin on the waiver wire at the defensive DST position, and they're available right now in tons of leagues in 73%. The next DST, the San Francisco 49ers to San Francisco. I thought they would have played better in an undermanned Houston team with Nico Collins out, but obviously that wasn't the case. But week 9, a good matchup with the Giants. We know this Giant offense is decimated. Malik Neighbors, he's been out for a while, and obviously he's out for the season. Cam Scatterbo in last week's ball game, dislocating the ankle, and now it's down to Jackson Dart, Tyrone Tracy, and Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, the main guys on this offense for New York. Obviously, that's not going to be that scary, and even an undermanned San Francisco team, I think, could go out there and bounce back after a bad loss. Week 6 at Tampa Bay, 30 points allowed, a sack. Week 7 versus Atlanta, 10 points allowed, 2 sacks, a fumble recovery. In week 8 at Houston, 26 points allowed, an INT. So the Giants give up the 8th most fantasy points to DSTs on the season, and that's a 1-week streaming option available in 79% of fantasy leagues. And I know they had a good matchup in week 8 and didn't deliver. I still will give them an ad this week. Next DST, the Jacksonville Jaguars. So the Jags, they're coming off a bye week this week, and their defense has been a hit or miss unit all season long as this Jacksonville Jaguar team. They got a good matchup coming up in week 9 at the Vegas Raiders. I give up the 4th most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. So Jacksonville, the first month of the season, they were going out there creating turnovers. They were still giving up points, but getting sacks and turnovers, and even finding the end zone as well at times. Week 5 versus Kansas City, 28 points allowed, pick 6 in that one, which was 100 yards. And week 6 versus Seattle, 20 points allowed, a sack. And week 7 versus the Rams, 35 points allowed. So coming off a bye week, getting regrouped, going into Vegas, like I said, giving up the 4th most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. I think Jacksonville is a 1-week streaming option where they're out there right now in tons of fantasy leagues. Is Jacksonville 94%? They're definitely an ad this week. In the final DST, we're staying in the same game going into next week is the Vegas Raiders. So Las Vegas, I know their defense isn't any good, but this Jaguar offense over the last couple weeks is definitely taking a step back. And I think Vegas in a home game as a streaming option, Jacksonville could turn the football over a couple times, and maybe this is a low-scoring game as well between these two teams. So the last few weeks, week 6 versus Tennessee, where it was a favorable matchup, obviously for Vegas, 10 points allowed, 6 sacks and interception, 2 fumble recoveries. And week 7, what do you expect at Kansas City? 31 points allowed and a sack. So coming off a bye, Jaguars give up 19th most fantasy points to defenses on the season. I think Las Vegas in this spot with Jacksonville coming in, and Trevor Lawrence hasn't looked great over the last few weeks, and Brian Thomas has had a down season in his sophomore year. I think we could see Vegas go out there and be a potential sleeper option out there. 86% of fantasy leagues, that's a few defense DST units I would add off the wire for week 9 of the fantasy football season.